While it's certainly fun to speculate about Nintendo's next-gen console, most rumors out there are pretty baseless. Obviously, Nintendo is staying tight-lipped about the inevitable Switch successor, so there's little to no concrete evidence on what exactly that system might look like. That being said, there has been some recent news that's piqued my interest more than most. Something that could be our first real hint toward the next generation of Nintendo, hidden in plain sight in some of our more recent games and official trailers. Today, I'm talking about color button theory. Before we get into it, if you're like me and need more Nintendo in your daily life, then subscribe to the channel. I have some exciting end-of-year videos coming soon that you might enjoy as we head toward big things in 2024 with Nintendo Switch and whatever comes next. But back to color button theory. This has to do with the in-game button prompts in some new and upcoming Nintendo Switch releases. For example, let's take a look at a game fresh on everyone's minds right now, Super Mario RPG. If we look at the battle UI, we'll notice a very specific color scheme for each button on the Switch controller. The A button is red, B is yellow, X is blue, and Y is green. If that sounds familiar, that's because it's the same as the Super Famicom controller, an iconic Nintendo button layout most recently seen in the new Nintendo 3DS last generation. Now this is a bit strange because on most standard Switch controllers, we don't have any special colors, and most games don't feature colored buttons on their UI either, especially not in this exact layout. Clearly, these on-screen buttons colored in the Super Famicom style were done for a reason, and maybe that reason is the successor to the Nintendo Switch will have these colored buttons as well. Now you might question the validity here, and rightfully so. This is only happening in one game that in itself is a remake of a Super Nintendo game. Maybe they just gave Super Mario RPG those colored buttons on the UI as a callback or reference to the original. And yes, I would leave it at that too if it wasn't for the reveal trailer for the upcoming Paper Mario Thousand Year Door remake. Look at the battle UI in this trailer too. The Thousand Year Door features those same Super Famicom colored buttons. For example, the red A button and the green Y button, just like we have in Super Mario RPG. So far, we're 2 for 2, and if we were to stop the investigation here, it would be really convincing that this might actually be a new style guide Nintendo is enforcing in more recent games, perhaps to future-proof them for backwards compatibility on a new console. A new console that features this same Super Famicom colored button layout. Now this is exciting news, not only because the Super Famicom buttons are really nice looking and serve as a cool callback to an all-time great console in Nintendo's history, but also because, just like I mentioned, it could suggest that backwards compatibility with the current Nintendo Switch game library might be in their plans. This would obviously be fantastic and welcome news because, as much as we might think it makes sense, in reality, backwards compatibility for the next Nintendo system is far from guaranteed. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. After the colored buttons in these two Mario games came to my attention, I had to investigate further. In response, I went ahead and looked at gameplay of many of my other Nintendo Switch games, old and new, to see if these particular button colors existed anywhere else. In my search, I couldn't find them in any of the older games. So again, it all lines up. The change seems to suggest that the new UI button colors Nintendo's implementing with Super Mario RPG Onward is part of an effort to keep newer games consistent with the button color scheme we might see on their next system. But as much as I think this theory might be onto something, there are, unfortunately, a lot of inconsistencies with it. If we comb through footage of some even more recent or upcoming games, titles like the recently released Dragon Quest Monsters The Dark Prince, and upcoming software like Splatoon 3 Side Order, Another Code Recollection, and Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, just to name a few, they do not feature this color scheme. They all have the standard uncolored buttons that we're used to, which really sends this theory screeching to a halt. If it happened to to line up that all these games had the same new standardized button colors going on, I'd think we'd really be onto something. But as of now, with these new and upcoming games looking as they are, it's going to take some time to tell if color button theory is really legit. As of now, I could only find one other example of color button theory, and that's from the Legend of Heroes series, with its newest localization, The Legend of Heroes Trails into Daybreak. In the small bits of gameplay I've seen from Daybreak, we can see the same Super Famicom colored button overlays in the Switch version. And what makes this especially interesting is the fact that the previous Trail Switch release, The Legend of Heroes Trails into Reverie, doesn't have them at all. This is significant because with these games, Nintendo itself is not making these decisions. These are third-party Nihon Falcom games, and the fact that Daybreak is shown to feature the Super Famicom button colors might suggest that Nintendo is now briefing developers about a new style guide where they should include these colored buttons in new games that come to their hardware. But that's all speculation. We're currently at a pivotal point for this theory. It's hard to say one way or the other right now, but if we end up seeing future games with these same new button colors, that might really help to lend more credence to the theory, which very excitingly could suggest backwards compatibility during the next generation of Nintendo. Generally, I try not to get too excited about Nintendo hardware rumors. Years back, I remember hearing several things about the Nintendo NX that didn't end up being true, and a Switch Pro has been rumored for the past several years. We all know how that turned out. But I like this colored button rumor because even though the clues are inconsistent at best, there's at least a real concrete change we can see and speculate about. It's not just an industry insider report that bases itself off no actual evidence. The fact is, there are 3 new and popular Switch games that feature Super Famicom colored button icons. That's real. And whatever the reason for the color change actually is, you'd be hard-pressed to argue that's just a coincidence. Have a great holiday, everyone, and thanks as always for watching.